Welcome back to A Reason to Talk with Chris Reason. Today we are getting into one of the darkest and most disturbing criminal cases in American history. The story of Gary Ridgway, better known as the Green River Killer. Let's get into it.
Tell me what you saw, tell me what you heard. Every weirdo legend, every hard-hit word. A reason to talk, a reason to talk. Chris Reason, we're here for the strange, the loud, the dark.
Before we get into today's episode, this episode is brought to you by Strong Coffee Company. Get your fix of coffee and essential nutrients in seconds with this protein coffee. Strong Coffee Company brings a revolution to your coffee experience with its premium instant blends designed for those who seek both convenience and health benefits. The Black Fair Trade Instant Coffee stands out, offering a robust and smooth flavor similar to a traditional cup of coffee, but enhanced with added benefits. Each serving is enriched with 15 grams of high-quality protein, 5 grams of MCTs, and 250 milligrams of adaptogens, including ashwagandha and theine. Use code CRN to get 20% off at Strong Coffee Company. Go to strongcoffeecompany.com and use promo code CRN to get 20% off your order today. That's promo code CRN. For nearly 2 decades, fear spread across Washington state as dozens of women disappeared. Investigators chased leads, interviewed suspects, and struggled to connect the growing number of murders. Meanwhile, the killer blended into ordinary life. He worked regular jobs. He attended church. He was married multiple times. And all while appearing normal, he was responsible for one of the highest confirmed victim counts of any serial killer in the United States history. This episode covers who Gary Ridgway was, how the murders began, the massive investigation that followed, and the forensic breakthrough that finally ended the case. This episode contains discussion of violence and murder, so listener discretion is advised. Let's begin. Gary Leon Ridgway was born on February 18, 1949 in Salt Lake City, Utah. His family later moved to Washington State, where he spent most of his life. By many accounts, Ridgway had a troubled childhood. He reportedly struggled socially and academically, and people who knew him described him as quite quiet and awkward. Investigators later learned that his relationship with his mother may have had a major psychological impact on him. Ridgway would eventually describe feelings of anger and confusion connected to women and sexuality. As a teenager, there were already warning signs. At age 16, Ridgway stabbed a 6-year-old boy who survived the attack. The incident was deeply disturbing because it appeared unprovoked. Ridgway later claimed he wanted to know what it felt like to kill someone. Despite the violent act, Ridgway continued on with a relatively ordinary life. He graduated high school, joined the Navy, and eventually married. To neighbors and coworkers, he didn't even stand out. That ordinary appearance would later become one of the most chilling parts of the case. The murders linked to the Green River Killer began in the early 1980s. Most of Ridgway's victims were young women and teenage girls. Many were sex workers or runaways operating in areas around Seattle and Tacoma, Washington. At the time, several victims disappeared within a relatively short period. Then came the horrifying discovery. Bodies began appearing near the Green River in King County, Washington. Some victims were found dumped into wooded areas, rivers, and remote locations. As more remains were discovered, investigators realized they were dealing with a serial killer. The media soon gave the unknown murderer a name, the Green River Killer. Fear spread quickly throughout the region. Women working in vulnerable situations became especially terrified. Parents warned teenagers about hitchhiking and disappearing alone. Police departments across the area were suddenly overwhelmed with missing persons reports. The scale of investigation grew rapidly. At one point, it became one of the largest serial murder investigations in American history. Gary Ridgway often targeted vulnerable women who could be approached without drawing much attention. Investigators later learned that he would typically pick up victims along major roads or areas known for prostitution. He appeared calm, and unthreatening. Ridgway drove ordinary vehicles and spoke softly, which helped him avoid suspicion. After gaining the trust of his victims, he would usually take them to secluded locations. Most victims were strangled. Ridgway later confessed that he preferred strangulation because it was quiet and did not attract attention. He also admitted to returning to dump sites multiple times after the murders. Investigators were shocked by how methodical he was. He often moved bodies, concealed remains in wooded areas, and avoided leaving obvious evidence behind. One reason he avoided capture for so long was because many victims came from marginalized communities. At the time, missing persons cases involving sex workers and runaways often received less immediate attention than other disappearances. That delay gave Ridgway opportunities to continue killing without being stopped. As the number of victims increased, law enforcement formed a massive task force. Hundreds of detectives, FBI agents, forensic specialists, and volunteers worked on the case. Thousands of tips poured in. Police interviewed countless suspects, and among those suspects was Gary Ridgway. Ridgway actually came to investigators' attention relatively early. Witnesses reported seeing his truck near areas where victims disappeared. Some women who survived encounters with him even described him to police, but investigators lacked enough evidence to arrest him. In 1984, Ridgway passed a polygraph test. At that time, that result helped reduce suspicion around him. Meanwhile, the murders continued. The task force explored countless theories and suspects over the years. The case became frustrating for investigators because the killer appeared careful, organized, and extremely difficult to track. One notable moment came when FBI profiler John Douglas consulted on the case. Douglas believed the killer was likely someone who appeared ordinary and blended into society. Obviously, Ridgway. The profile turned out to be remarkably accurate. Ridgway maintained a normal-looking routine. He worked as a truck painter, he attended church regularly, and he even married during the years investigators searched for the killer. To people around him, he did not fit the stereotype of a serial murderer. For years, investigators lacked the forensic technology needed to conclusively tie Ridgway to the murders. But by the late 1990s and early 2000s, DNA science had improved dramatically. Investigators revisited evidence collected decades earlier. This time, advanced testing produced a breakthrough. DNA recovered from several victims matched Gary Ridgway. After nearly 20 years of investigation, police finally had enough evidence. On November 30th, 2001, Gary Ridgway was arrested. The arrest shocked many people who knew him. Coworkers described him as quiet and polite. Neighbors said he seemed normal. But investigators believed that they had finally captured one of America's most prolific serial killers. Following his arrest, prosecutors faced an enormous challenge. There were dozens of potential victims, scattered evidence, and many remains that had never been identified. To recover more information and help families receive answers, prosecutors offered Ridgway a plea agreement. In exchange for avoiding the death penalty, Ridgway agreed to confess and cooperate with investigators. What followed was horrifying. Ridgway calmly described many of the murders in detail. He led investigators to body dump sites and admitted to killing far more women than originally confirmed. He ultimately pleaded guilty to 48 murders at first, later increasing that confirmed count to 49. But investigators believe the real number may be much higher. Some estimates suggest Ridgway may have killed more than 70 women. During court proceedings, Ridgway displayed very little emotion, which one murderer would probably do the same thing. One of the most memorable moments came when family members of victims addressed him directly. Many expressed grief, anger, and frustration over the lives he destroyed. In response, Ridgway simply stated that he killed as many women as he did because he hated most prostitutes and wanted to kill them. The statement stunned the courtroom. Ridgway was sentenced to multiple consecutive life sentences without the possibility of parole. He avoided execution, but he will spend the rest of his life in prison. The Green River Killer investigation changed criminal investigations in several important ways. First, it demonstrated how critical forensic science and DNA testing could become in solving cold cases. Without advances in DNA analysis, Ridgway may never been conclusively identified. Second, the case highlighted serious problems in how society and law enforcement responded to missing person cases involving vulnerable communities. Many critics argued that victims who were sex workers or runaways did not initially receive the same urgency or public attention as other missing persons cases. The conversation continues today. The case also changed procedures for serial crime investigations. Large-scale task forces, evidence preservation, and interagency cooperation became even more important after investigators studied mistakes and successes from the Green River investigation. Families of victims spent years searching for answers. Some waited decades before learning what happened to their loved ones. Even after Ridgway's conviction, investigators continued to search for unidentified remains connected to the case. The Green River Killer case remains one of the most studied serial murder cases in American history. Part of the fascination comes from the sheer scale of the crimes. Another reason is how ordinary Gary Ridgway appeared. Unlike many other media portrayals of killers, Ridgway did not appear charismatic or highly intelligent. Instead, investigators described him as someone who blended into everyday life. That normal appearance allowed him to avoid suspicion for years. The case also represents a major turning point in forensic science. DNA technology ultimately succeeded where years of interviews and surveillance had failed. For many people, that case is also a reminder of how vulnerable communities can sometimes be overlooked. The victims who were real people with families, dreams, and lives that mattered. The part of the story is important not to lose amid the notoriety of the killer himself. Gary Ridgway, the Green River Killer, committed crimes that terrorized Washington state for nearly 2 decades. His arrest finally brought answers to many families, but the full scope of the case may never be known. The investigation became one of the largest and longest-running serial murder cases in United States history. Changed forensic investigations forever and remains a chilling example of how someone outwardly ordinary can hide horrifying crimes. Most importantly, the case serves as a reminder to remember the victims, the dozens of women and girls whose lives were taken far too soon. Ridgway was placed in solitary confinement at Washington State Penitentiary in Walla Walla in January 2004. On May 14, 2015, he was transferred to the USP Florence High, a high-security federal prison east of Canyon City, Colorado. In September 2015, after a public outcry and discussions with Governor Jay Inslee, Corrections Secretary Bernie Warner announced that Ridgway would be transferred back to Washington to be easily accessible for open murder investigations. Ridgway was returned by charter plane to Washington State Penitentiary in Walla Walla from USP Florence High on October 24, 2015. In September of 2024, Ridgway was briefly transferred from the Washington State Penitentiary to the King County Jail for a few days before being transferred back to WSP. Authorities refused to give any explanation for the transfer. The transport order was unsealed in March 2025, revealing that Ridgway was temporarily transferred to help locate more victim remains. In December 2025, Tacoma radio station KIRO-FM reported on 5 anonymous sources that Ridgway was receiving end-of-life care in prison. However, speaking to Fox 13 Seattle KCPQ, a director of the Department of Corrections said those allegations were inaccurate and said that nothing has changed in Ridgway's existing health conditions. Another official from the DOC refuted these claims in a request for comment by Us Weekly, adding that despite Ridgway's health issues, he is not under hospice care. Former King County Sheriff Dave Reichert said that the speculations probably stemmed from a photograph showing Ridgway in a wheelchair in 2024. Reichert called Ridgway a pathological liar who at times didn't know the truth from lie, and confirmed that King County continues to work in missing person and cold cases presumably linked to Ridgway. At the time of this recording, Ridgway is currently 77 from when he was born on February 18th, 1949. I want to thank you, everybody, for listening to today's episode of Reason to Talk with Chris Reason. I know it's kind of dark with the Green River Killer, Strangler, whatever you want to call him. Please hit that follow, subscribe, wherever you're listening to your podcast. Hit the like, rate, all that stuff. Please share, and check out the promo code of CRN at Strong Coffee Company. Get 20% off your order today. Protein coffee. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to hit the follow and share it. Otherwise, other interest in true crime history and criminal investigations. Peace and bacon grease, guys.
Tell me what you saw.